there's a lot of death associated with the U.S. empire, and I'm pretty sure as a conservative who believes in absolute moral standards, I'm supposed to speak out about that. I just knew something was wrong. And I just came to the conclusion that the state is the locus of sociopathic behavior in the world, both domestically and foreign.
I'm Hillary Rodham Clinton, and this is Masterclass.
In 2009, Clinton stood with Defense Secretary Robert Gates, a Republican, and called for 30,000 more troops in Afghanistan. On most foreign policy decisions, including Libya, Clinton was in favor of equally aggressive action, if not more so than former Bush appointee Gates. Clinton and Obama got away with hawkish policies because they stuck to the language of humanitarian intervention and liberation. Clinton helped assert the right of the US government to intervene in any country of its choosing, using the most brutal means possible to achieve its ends.
We've talked a lot today about the dangers that cryptocurrencies pose to our economy. Criminals with cyber attacks, the adverse environmental impact. Bitcoin consumes more energy than entire countries, is a disaster for our planet.
They're not a better means of payment. They undermine the government's ability to maintain robust economic growth over time.
Yeah.
Well, you were pretty mean to Senator Warren, though, on Twitter recently. You slammed her, man. Please don't call the manager on me, Senator Karen.
She struck first. She called me a freeloader and a grifter who doesn't pay taxes, basically. And I'm literally paying the most tax that any individual in history has ever paid this year. And she doesn't pay tax. And her salary is paid for by the taxpayer. If you could die by irony, she would be dead.
Any crypto hits go, let me spend everything that you see is something I invent. And it's only a percent.
I don't know if it's far-fetched to ask, but there is concern that Russian actors could be continuing to fuel things as this protest grows, but perhaps even instigating it from the outset.
Folks, great news. The fastest economic growth in 38 years in our first year in office. Things are moving.
Why are we even invested in this? Because the media continually tells us we're doing something valuable instead of telling us the truth. Look, it don't matter who you vote for, you're getting the same deal. That's what you're going to be getting. That's what's on offer. Shut up and like it.
Well, guys, the cathedral is burning, and it is glorious. Welcome to Toxic Airwaves. How you doing tonight, Steve?
I'm doing great. I'm watching it burn. It's good to watch. It's fun.
Yeah. These people that we're up against are complete morons. And like Svetsky said, democracy is the rule of the competent by the incompetent. Very, very good description of what's happening right now.
Absolutely.
So... But yeah, today's episode, I titled it, Free Men Don't Simp for Politicians.
Yeah.
Beta cooks, simp for politicians.
Which is it's a good time for it. So our state, kind of kicking it off, our state, Arizona, proposed that legal tender bill that kind of got a little wild. And yeah, I guess I don't know, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but my just absolute favorite thing about the whole thing is just how blatantly unconstitutional it is. Like that they're not even trying, and that it's just that much more of a go fuck yourself to the federal government. And I've been really enjoying watching that unfold. And I don't know a lot about the political process, so I'm not sure what the odds are of this passing or getting implemented or anything like that. And I don't really care too much, but it is very fun to watch, and the kind of turmoil that it's created has been enjoyable.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been fun. And I got really excited at first just because it took me by surprise. And then I started thinking a little bit about, like, we're dealing with the state right now.
Right.
The state is the most evil institution out there because they have a monopoly on violence and no recourse for how they use that violence. And it's very, very apparent looking around the world today. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be something behind this. There was no lobbying money put into it.
Yeah.
it just came out of the blue. And things that start to come to mind is that, you know, the state's always looking for new ways to tax people. And that might be part of it. But there's also, you know, we have a very vibrant defense industry, a lot of secretive government contract stuff, a lot of, you know, weird, you know, go after your privacy. We have Raytheon here working on putting nanoparticles on your food to track it. So they could be doing all sorts. I mean, who knows? They could be launching their surveillance shitcoin, or, you know, I think ultimately this is going to lead to shitcoining, because anytime the government touches anything related to Bitcoin, they instantly welcome the shitcoiners like Mayor Suarez. So that's my
a lot of people don't realize most of the drones that go kill children over in Yemen or wherever get flown from southern Arizona. A lot of people aren't aware of that. There's a huge intelligence community presence. You know, not obviously the formal stuff. There's Fort Huachuca as an army base, all kinds of stuff. But outside of that, like, there's massive just these like deep state parasites all over Arizona, especially southern Arizona. So is that involved? Who knows? We'll, you know, hopefully find out sooner or later. But.
Yeah. But what is not, you know, bearish is Bitcoin adoption in Arizona and the stuff that we got going on. That's super bullish. And this is the stance I'll always take, is like, fuck the state. You know, it's up to the individuals to protect their freedom. It's not up to the state. Like, if you sit around and you whine about how something's unconstitutional and, you know, how something's, you know, bad that the government's doing, and you're not taking action in your own life, then you're just, you know, essentially alert. Like, quit sitting on your laurels, being a wimp, expecting the government to protect your freedom, because that's the stupidest standpoint to take. Like, you as an individual are responsible for protecting yourself. If you don't want to be surveilled, then stop using surveillance technology. If you want to be free, then move out of the open air prisons and start, you know, looking at your income, start looking at, you know, different ways the state coerces you, and seek to minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah.
So.
And a discussion we have on here periodically is just kind of the idea that the one and only leverage point for, you know, hyper Bitcoinization, human flourishing, all these wonderful things, is individuals building their own economic power with Bitcoin. It's not, you know, there's a lot of people on, especially on Bitcoin Twitter, who want you to, you know, donate to politicians, call your congressman, blah blah, like all this like that. Like, on top of, in my opinion, being just totally unethical, I think it's also just absolutely hot garbage strategy as well, because it's like that does nothing to promote, you know, what I see as the actual leverage point, the actual point where people experience freedom and actually get out of the system, which is accumulating Bitcoin, building their economic power, and being sovereign enough, wealthy enough, whatever, to, you know, tell Elizabeth Warren, whoever, go fuck yourself. I don't care. Like, what you say doesn't matter anymore. And that's accessible to everyone, you know, period. And it's going to be interesting to watch more people figure it out. You know, a lot of people listening to this have probably already figured it out, but as more and more people kind of get to that point and figure it out, I think it's going to be super cool to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're in a place right now where we can literally tell them to go pound sand, because we have money that they can't confiscate from us if we secure it properly. If you have your corn on Coinbase, not the case, but, you know, you can do things with multi-sig, and, you know, the standpoint that we just have so much leverage today where they just can't whisk away all of our assets. They can put us in prison, and it's a forced hodl. Bitcoin's worth more when we get out. Like, that's the relationship we have with the state right now as a result of Bitcoin, and it is absolutely incredible. And, you know, Elon Musk, not a big fan of him, but he has the proper, you know, attitude, calling, you know, these senators out, calling him Senator Karen, and just ratioing the shit out of them. That's the type of attitude we can have with these maniacs, these parasites.
And that language of just absolute and total utter disrespect is extremely important. There's a lot of people who, you know, they want to promote the idea that it's like we need to have civil discourse, and I think that's just complete bullshit. I think these people need to be treated with the absolute just maximum amount of just blatant disrespect and mockery possible. And the reason for that is not only because it's fun, but it definitely is, but also because it's like they win when they control the narrative. They win when you play their game on their field. They win, when you enter their frame. And when they can control the frame, when they can control the discussion, it's just like any human relationship. Whoever controls the frame, whoever controls the environment controls pretty much the outcome. And it's when we move the conversation so far outside the window of what they find acceptable, that's, I think, a big part of us winning. And so it's like when, Elizabeth Warren talks about this or that, or Ted Cruz says, good things about Bitcoin mining. It's like, in my opinion, the correct response is something along the lines of pointing out how they're complicit in murdering children overseas, or like something horrific like that, which is absolutely true. What's that?
You should show off the book.
Yeah, it's a new book. I haven't read it yet. I just got it, but we have Enough Already by Scott Horton. Time to End the War on Terrorism. But it's just like all this evil shit that we know about. But it's like people go back to, actually, I think the proposed GDP raise is actually going to be 3%, not 2% from that policy. And here's the data. It's like, go fuck yourself. That's not going to do anything. These people don't respond to facts. Like, they don't care.
Yeah, that's good.
But which is why, kind of bringing it back to the Bitcoin legal tender law. Like, I think my initial read is I see it as an extremely positive step forward, not because I give a shit about what the state thinks about whether Bitcoin's legal tender, but just because of how just confrontational it is and how, like I said, the whole thing is just completely unconstitutional. And so the fact that they would propose something that is completely unconstitutional, I think is progress, because sooner more people realize that's a piece of toilet paper, then sooner the better.
Yeah. And that's a good segue. I don't know. I'll circle back to that. I think that's a good segue into what's happening in Canada right now. Shout out to Zorn. Says the honking will continue until morale improves. I was watching some of the live streams of what's happening in Canada right now with the truckers, and it's pretty cool. But a lot of these people are just so stuck in like the statist mentality of like, we need to influence the government to change instead of realizing the government's the problem. And they're doing things like singing the national anthem and stuff like that. And there's something to be, I think where they get confused is they, really feel a lot of pride for their region and for who they are culturally as a community. And they see the government standing in the way of it. But I think it's important, from a solution standpoint of like, the government's not your friend and they're not playing nice. Like going out and protesting is powerful, and where it's powerful is that everybody sees it. And so when Trudeau goes up there and says, this is a fringe minority, and then you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there, hundreds of thousands of people making a lot of noise and causing a lot of disruption, and the media is ignoring it. Everybody sees that. That's where it's powerful. But as far as like trying to change the way that the government's behaving, they don't give a shit. These people are psychopathic murderers, and they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. They want to kill your kids. Essentially they want you to be a miserable, like they see you as something to extract wealth from, to fund whatever their various nefarious activities are. Like that's the relationship that you have with the state. Like you and when you become a nuisance, they'll throw you in a cage. And it's, trying to change the government or like get different people in is just a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. And what they're doing us a huge favor though too, in that they're making it extremely easy for us to identify the people that we want to be around. It's like one example is the gym that I go to here. I found it because on their website they had a big thing that said basically, we got fooled once, never again. We'll never close again, all this kind of stuff. And so and then everybody that goes there is just based as hell, fun to be around, enjoyable people. Like I've met some really cool people there, and I think those are the kind of things we can lean into as the very, very positive aspect of it. Of it's become very easy to identify who's worth being around and who isn't. If you see somebody walking around outside without a mask, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, moron. Okay, well, didn't waste my time on that. you know, it's like they've adapted this whole kind of uniform, and it's just, I don't know, it's good. And it's not just the COVID stuff. Like it's everything else. Like you can talk to somebody, you can pretty quickly, you know, it usually takes me about 30 to 60 seconds to figure out if, you know, somebody I just met is reasonably worthwhile or just totally blue-pilled.
Yeah. And that's kind of the idea of the color revolution, is like you identifying those people. There's ways to see it. And right now, it's the people that aren't wearing a mask that are typically the ones that you want to associate with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Where I was going to go. One of the topics that, you know, has been asked a few weeks is like, when will people wake up? And the reality is that statist authoritarians probably won't wake up. And this has been the case in a lot of different points in history, where they will literally go to the gulag supporting these ideas and supporting their own imprisonment. And this is, you know, the mindset a lot of people get stuck in. And it's very apparent, like looking around, why are a lot of conservatives right now that have had their businesses shut down still doing the back the blue stuff, when the law enforcement has been their oppressors?
Yeah.
Like that is the mentality. And so, you know, waiting around for and expecting other people to wake up, it's not going to happen, guys.
Yeah.
These people are stuck, and it doesn't mean that they're all hopeless. Like, some might, but the majority won't. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to see that, you know, because ultimately they're conformists, and they want that's where their values lie. It's not in freedom, it's not in liberty, and it's not in, you know, anything moral or good.
Yeah. And it's you know, another thing we've talked about a lot here that's been popular in you know, Bitcoin space, especially I think since Svetsky started promoting it, but just that idea, just that whole essay of Isaiah's job, and what exactly Isaiah's job was, and what the framework was around it, and just the idea being, you know, our job is to speak the truth to the best we can, to help as many people as possible, to inform as many people as possible. You know, like, we want people to be free. We want people to use Bitcoin. We want people to be sovereign. We want people to use Bitcoin in whatever way they see fit, however it fits into their life. Like, it's none of our business. And, you know, it's but in working on that, you know, it's like my personal approach is, you know, if I'm talking to Bitcoin about somebody, like, I'm starting with roughly an anarchist tirade. Like, I do not subscribe to, you know, call it the Dan Held school of thought on this kind of stuff. Like, I want people to understand what is going on and what the implications are. And if that means I have a much lower success rate, then I'm totally at peace with that. As far as success rate being like getting people to buy Bitcoin on Cash App or something like that, I don't know. But I think, I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna say we have a duty. We don't have a duty, but it's just, I think it's important to share people as you know, as complete of a picture of the truth as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's not liberty if you're, you know, watering it down. And this is like, yeah, it drives me crazy, because this is what, you know, simping for politicians is essentially, is it's watering down the message. Like, Bitcoin is not a tool to make friends with these people. It's a tool to completely eliminate them from our lives. Yeah. Like, that's the purpose of Bitcoin. And it came about because central banking is so incredibly evil, and it was so problematic that we needed something in the market, you know, delivered in Bitcoin. And yeah, it drives me crazy. But
should we go to Spaces?
Yeah.
Does anybody in Spaces have any further rants to add on or anything like that? Any comments, questions?
Yeah, request if you want. Young Alert says the honk will continue until truckers. Or I think I already said that. A wild skeef is my spirit animal. I invited a couple of people.
Nice.
But yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is something, it's interesting, like what Tom Woods is saying. I know Tom Woods gets a lot of shit from Bitcoiners, which is warranted and fair, because if you're out there, trying to promote libertarian principles and you're not promoting Bitcoin, I don't really know what you're doing. I'll just, give some people a pass for being ignorant on the topic. But one of the things he was saying is like he was a conservative and he realized, that he believes in morals and he has to go after people chatting us, or is that in a different chat?
Yeah, Kiwi Hodl's bothering me. He's saying never use the phrase Dan held school of thought again. I was using it in a derogatory way. It's acceptable.
Gosh. Dan Held has a big head. How much do you think it weighs?
I don't know.
How much does the average human head weigh? You can take the average human head and double it for Dan Held because that guy's got a big head. But he does not have a big brain. Or at least whoever is running his Twitter account doesn't. That's weird. Or spaces on the... Oh, there it is. That little red dot. I don't know where it went.
2 feet.
But yeah. Constitution. Let's talk about the Constitution a little bit and break that down. Sorry, Ron Paul, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
So, a must read. Very, very important to read is No Treason.
Yeah.
By Spooner.
Yeah. 150 years old. He had it all sorted out. Actually more than 150 years old. But yeah, that's where I always like if I talk to like people who are usually boomers, but people that are like, oh my gosh, we're in such a crisis, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I like pointing them back to Lysander Spooner, who was writing well over 100 years ago about, this whole idea of the Constitution of no authority, why it's garbage, why it doesn't matter. It's, he has that classic quote of, I'm going to butcher it, but it's essentially the Constitution has either ordained a government as we have, or it's allowed it to exist. And it's either way, it's an unfit. I'm going to just have to look it up because that was terrible. But
do you know that he created a private post office system and got shut down?
I did not know that.
It was illegal at the time. Today we have UPS and FedEx, stuff like that was illegal. But he was a boss. He was like one of those people that like, kind of like a Ross Ulbricht that actually, believed in what they talked about and practiced it, which was pretty cool.
All right, here's the quote. But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it's unfit to exist. And again, I believe that was written like 1870 or something like that. And it's just something that like, I think a lot of us in the Bitcoin space are pretty well aware of it, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is like you mentioned this last week, I think, is like, Shane said that the Constitution is one of the most, what was the word? Oh, the average human head weighs 2.3 pounds, so Dan Held's head weighs 4.6. Thanks, AK-47.
According to Google.
Yeah, Google peddles fake news, so we'll have to fact check that on DuckDuckGo. But yeah, Shane was saying that the Constitution is one of the most tyrannical documents ever written, I think he said. And the majority of people hearing that would be like, what?
Yeah.
The Constitution's what protects freedom. What about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment? Lurk says, I heard Dan Held's head rocks 5+ pounds. That's amazing. But I mean, the reality is like, I didn't sign the Constitution. The majority of the people in the United States didn't agree to or sign the Constitution.
Yeah.
And we're born into it and ruled by it.
The majority of people in Philadelphia where it was signed, didn't even give a shit about it. I mean, I imagine know much about it. Like, it's, I don't know. It goes, for me, the fundamental book, one of the fundamental books is the most dangerous superstition. Is that, we've talked about it on here quite a bit, but it goes straight to the foundation of it, which is the whole idea of political authority is inherently illegitimate. And that's, something that you kind of bringing it back to the beginning, like something that came up with this new Bitcoin legal tender law in Arizona is we saw a lot of people get excited about it. It's like, oh, this is really awesome. This is the state embracing Bitcoin and encouraging it or whatever. And it's like, first of all, we don't know that. First of all, let's give it a little time and figure out if that's even what's happening, because it's probably not. And then the other side of it is, even if that's happening, like, we don't look to, or we shouldn't, I don't think, look to the state for approval of what we're doing with Bitcoin or not doing with Bitcoin, or how we handle it or how we treat it or how we use it. And it's like, I just don't, to me, it's like there's going to be, I think, significant conflict with the state in one way or another. This idea that something is going to come along that has the potential to take power away from people who have held on to power successfully since at least the end of World War II. And that's just going to be an easy kind of fun little transition where, they see the logic, they see the reason, and like, oh, gosh darn it, you guys are right. That does make a lot of sense. Like, I'd love that, but it seems pretty unlikely.
Yeah. And it bothers me when people champion people like Cynthia Lummis, for example, because she'll go out there and say, Bitcoin's good, yada, 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 but we need to regulate it and we need to have common sense regulations. It's like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't need any regulations. You can't talk about regulating something like Bitcoin and honestly believe in free market principles.
Yeah.
And then they'll bring up the conversation like, well, we need to protect people. It's like, well, Bitcoin protects people from the state. We need protection from the state, not the state protecting us from Bitcoin, and ultimately, like, there's a lot of people living out there that don't take personal responsibility for things. And we see the results of that today. We see the results of that in our financial markets. There's so much malinvestment, and it just amazes me how many people I know that go to work and put money into their pension funds in Arizona, and the funds are completely unfunded. And then these politicians have the gall to come down to us, the normal people, and say, oh, well, we need to protect you. And it's just so backwards to me. And so, yeah, like, seeing stuff like that makes me skeptical. Like, what would be super bullish is when, and it's happening, is when people go and start transacting peer to peer amongst themselves, and they say, we don't give a shit about the state.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to completely ignore it. We'll sell our raw milk or, whatever non-FDA approved foods, and we'll sell it for Bitcoin. I think that's the stuff that we should get really excited about. And it's not about getting excited about mass adoption and what everybody else is doing around you, because if you look to what the average person is doing, that's a terrible metric for how to live free. Yeah. That's a great metric to know how to live enslaved. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. Like, what's exciting is when you can actually experience liberation from this nonsense.
Yeah.
That's what's exciting.
Yep. And the metric that matters is as many, in my opinion, the metric that matters is as many individuals as possible accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible. Like, that's the one metric. That's what I pay attention to. That's what I invest as much of my time and energy in. That's how I chose my employment, because I thought it was a mechanism by which I could somehow play some small little role in more individuals accumulating more Bitcoin. Because it's like, I think as long as that goes up, we're moving in the right direction, and it's going up really fast, and it's really fun to watch.
DuckDuckGo says, quotes, but an abnormally large head is a sign something else is wrong.
I do think it's funny, but there's like a billion things that suck about him that are so much like more egregious than his head size.
Here, let's get a round of applause for Dan Held's large head. How you doing, Maximus?
Yo, I just wanted to add something about Lysander Spooner. So he's just all around an interesting guy. And honestly, like, I don't know all that much about him. I do have a book called Let's Abolish Government. And he didn't actually like put together that book. It's just a collection of his writings. Like it starts with trial by jury. That's like chapter 1. And he was a legal theorist, an entrepreneur, a lawyer. Like you guys mentioned, he ran his own post office that competed with the USPS, and then they banned his business model. If anyone didn't know that, the U.S. government banned his business model, and he fought them. Another interesting point is he was also an abolitionist and an anarchist. However, he defended as far as I know, you can fact check me on this. He defended the South. And I don't know if he defended them in the sense that he obviously didn't defend slavery because he was an abolitionist, but he defended the South's right to secede. So he was in a very niche, as we all know, he was in a niche position, but he was in a niche position specifically for that reason as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. He was on the right side of history.
For a lot of things. Yeah.
I mean, man. Imagine being an abolitionist during the Civil War.
Well, I mean, and as a general principle, I can definitely see the logic behind defending the South's right to secede. The slavery narrative came around much, much later. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's one of those things. It's like 20/20 hindsight. What would you do if you were there in 1860? Yeah, I have no fucking clue.
Well, you know that by what you're doing now. You know, if you're not willing to put your neck out there to fight the mass nonsense and be, difficult and not cooperative with the state and all the terrible things they do. If you're,
Yeah. So look, I think it's more murky on the Civil War than it was with like Nazi Germany or Soviet Union or something like that. Like I don't know. It's not like the North was any less racist or any less.
I think in a lot of cases, actually, they were more racist. And you can fact check me on this too. I believe Abraham Lincoln didn't exactly care about freeing the slaves, and he did it for political reasons. He actually did it to punish the South. I believe the Emancipation Proclamation left out not Virginia. I think they left out West Virginia because it was around the Civil War where West Virginia split from Virginia. It's been a while since I looked into the details on this, but it left out a few slave states that were actually part of the North, and I believe West Virginia was in that category.
Yeah.
It didn't actually free all the slaves. It was a punishment to the South. Yeah. And I believe, he didn't want to free. He didn't care. It's not that he was against or for it. He just used it as a political tool. And then I think General Lee at one point said that if he could end the war tomorrow, that he would free all the slaves or something like that. So it's a lot more nuanced than like, oh, the Union went to war to free the slaves. No, they just wanted the Union to stay together, or at least Lincoln did. And then he used that to consolidate power, as leaders always do with war.
And Lincoln was, in his personal views, was very, very clear. He saw no future of blacks and whites living together peacefully. He was like, whatever we do, we got to get them the fuck out of here. Like back to Africa, out to the Caribbean. He's like, who cares? Who gives a fuck? Just get them out of here. This is not going to work. I mean,
Isn't Liberia like that whole thing?
Oh yeah.
On the west coast of Africa.
Yeah, and he even we can look at anybody in the 1800s and say, oh, they're a racist piece of shit. But it's like, even compared to his peers, Lincoln had a lot of very troublesome views on the matter, and like was far from some there were a lot of legit abolitionists around who were like had fully embraced equality of the races, like all this wonderful stuff, like all this stuff that's so obvious to us now. But like back then there were people who were way ahead of the curve and actually saw it. And it's like, oh yeah, now you know what? Like everyone's actually a human being with value and worth, and and we shouldn't hate people because of how they were born, which was a pretty radical view back then. Today it's obvious, but it's like Abraham Lincoln was not one of those people. Like he just had. And it's like the idea of giving him credit for slavery is just completely and utterly retarded too. It's like the reason slavery ended was the Industrial Revolution. The reason slavery ended was because enough people made a cost-benefit analysis on slavery and decided that it just wasn't worth how much trouble it was anymore. It's like these are not angels that did these things. As you're kind of alluding to, it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than a lot of people give it credit to. But I personally, I would attribute the end of slavery to the Industrial Revolution, not to Abraham Lincoln and things like that.
The first person who I heard make that point was Stefan Molyneux. Actually, he had some interesting points on that. I haven't watched any of his stuff for a long time, but he was one of the ones that actually got me. One of the initial videos that I saw that got me into Bitcoin and anarchy. I was already going down the rabbit hole of somewhat of Bitcoin libertarianism, but that was one of the ones that helped quote radicalize me, I guess you could say. But another interesting tidbit that is actually kind of I wouldn't necessarily say a counterpoint, but it's kind of like a lesson in unintended consequences. Not government unintended consequences, but so the cotton gin, right? Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin, and he actually wanted to make life easier. He's like, if I can't end slavery, I want to make life easier for the people who are enslaved, picking the cotton, right? Or doing anything along the supply chain of, processing the cotton. So he created the cotton gin because before the cotton gin, they had to pick out the seeds by hand, right? But unintentionally, arguably inevitably, what happened was it boosted the demand for from the agricultural or from the people growing the cotton, like the people that are in charge or own the plantations, right? Because the next step is de-seeding them. So that's say you have growers of weed, and then you have the people that are next in the chain, right? If they have a lot more ability to process that, eventually, perhaps eventually demand catches up, and then there's more pressure on, the people picking it. So it actually had, the opposite effect of what he wanted. Similarly to the printing press with Gutenberg, yes, it was people were able to distribute Bibles around Europe. They were able to cut the Catholic Church out of it. There was the layperson languages. I can't remember technically the word for whatever word was the any individual language that people spoke, the layperson language, like Germanic or French or something like that, versus Latin, right? So it kind of was like a cutting of the curtain, right? The printing press, but it also distributed a bunch of books on how to hold a witch trial and a witch burning. So there was actually mass hysteria because this is a time of great tumult, right? Kind of like now, it's not always a neat process. It's a messy process. Change is a messy process. So it's similar. The cotton gin was similar to the Gutenberg printing press in that kind of sense.
And this is
super good points.
This is an argument I bring up with Bitcoin and why we might want to halt the brakes a little bit on mass adoption, because essentially what you have happening around a large portion of the world is people are and this is the case in Tucson, is people are transacting mostly in cash, which is not surveilled. And when you have things like Chiva Wallet, like a centralized government wallet being given to all these people, and all these people airdropped and they're using it, it opens up the door for a new level of surveillance, which could be problematic. And I think ultimately Bitcoin's going to be a tool for freedom. And, hard money is very, very apparent that benefits people, ultimately. But I think unless we, focus on sovereign individuals being the primary focus above just getting everybody on Coinbase, or whatever the case is, I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
There could be very, very negative unintended consequences. Okay, Ephesians is chatting. Good point. I forgot about the ad. Should play the ad real quick.
We got Ephesians and Joe two. I think I can't remember if I promised it to Ephesians, but we're pretty excited about the ad this week. So we're gonna play the ad. If you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see the video version. If you're on Spaces, you'll hear the beautiful voice of Local in your earbuds.
Cool.
Toxic Airwaves is brought to you by Synthetic Wombs. Our first sponsor this week is a new joint venture between Pfizer and the Ethereum Foundation to offer synthetic wombs. We at Toxic Airwaves are deeply committed to full gender equality and are taking action to show that by giving our listeners 20% off their first purchase of a synthetic womb from this exciting new joint venture. Use promo code TOXICWomb for the 20% discount, and the first 100 listeners who use the promo code will also get a free upgrade to the Babies on the Blockchain package, valued at over $1,000 plus $3,000 in gas fees. It is a turnkey solution to tokenize your future child as an ERC20 token. If you are a parent who values time in a cubicle more than the miracle of childbirth and are totally willing to disregard a few 100,000 years of human history, then order your synthetic womb today, and don't forget to use the promo code TOXICWomb for 20% off.
Yeah, that was a beautiful ad. Very, very excited about this one, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's a good product. It's, gender equality is a big problem these days, and growing babies in a laboratory is how we fix that.
Yeah. And what was interesting is I was looking at the demographics of who listens to our podcast this week, and I guarantee you that we have the highest listener rate of non-binary individuals.
I'm very proud of that. Very happy.
We're at 5%.
5% non-binary for this podcast. So we've got something else, another sponsor, another revenue source in the works that I think is really gonna help us out in that area and kind of really help us push diversity and inclusion, which is badly needed within the Bitcoin space. We're very excited about that.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee you that BitBoy doesn't have 5% non-binary listeners.
It's true. What was that report from? Like Spotify or something?
Yeah, it was just the Anchor demographics.
Nice.
I would imagine what that is people have their privacy together and it can't tell what you are.
Probably.
Only 5% of our people have their privacy together.
Oh, wait.
What's going on, Gazala?
Gazala, did you hear our ad, or do we need to play it again?
Oh, play it again. I missed it. I just joined.
Okay.
We'll play it again in a little bit, or towards the end. Our ad is Toxic Wombs.
Synthetic wombs.
Yeah.
It's a partnership between Pfizer and the Ethereum Foundation to offer the solution to gender equality, which is synthetic wombs.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure that if you got pregnant, you had the opportunity not to miss work.
Yeah. We think time in a cubicle is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to help our listeners with that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
man, good on Vitalik for.
That's great.
I saw local joined. I know he's in the market.
Gender equality, brought to you by Pfizer.
Biology legitimately doesn't matter anymore because of toxic wombs or synthetic wombs. I should probably get the sponsor name right before I talk about it.
Yeah, they're giving us all this money to fund our operations.
I mean, that part's cool, but the really cool part about this is putting your kids on the blockchain.
Yeah,
that's the signal.
So with the I guess we could talk a little bit more about our sponsor, plug them a little bit more. So that's you heard it in the ad, but one of the things that you really get with our promo code is it's a very important, it's a Babies on a Blockchain package. So we mentioned that's valued at over $1,000 plus $3,000 in gas fees. But it's just, I mean, if you're trying to tokenize your child, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. It's very good.
Yeah.
And I do have a question about the synthetic wombs, or about the toxic wombs.
Well, toxic womb is the promo code for the synthetic womb.
Use toxic wombs.
So with this toxic womb, do they get mainlined mRNA through the synthetic umbilical cord? I'm just kind of like wondering how safe they're going to be when they pop out.
Oh yeah, in utero vaccination is mandatory. Yeah, no question about it. They will come out vaxxed for COVID for sure.
I feel so much more insured.
Yeah. There's the babies on a blockchain is just one of the upgrades. You can subscribe to only organic nutrition packages for your child in the lab. There's a lot of opportunities. Obviously, it's all plant based. They would never ever introduce the horror of animal product consumption. So. I believe last one I looked at, it's roughly 75% soy is what the child would be getting in the synthetic womb.
Yeah, and they're going to be placed on puberty blocker or hormone blockers to prevent their gender from developing until they can decide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't. Yeah, there's not a mandate that everything is done gender neutral. But there's certainly a lot of resources provided to kind of inform people sort of the dangers of gendered parenting and assigning a child a pronoun, which is just completely barbaric.
Does the baby have to give any adrenochrome as commission? No, that's the Clinton Foundation. If you want to get into the adrenochrome stuff, go to that'd be a great ad.
Yeah. We'll reach out to them, see if we can get some more funding for our operations from the Clinton Foundation. It's a pretty good marriage of principles.
So Zorn wants to know his 2 children, how to claim them on the blockchain. I think they would make good NFTs. Yeah, see that's one thing that's amazing about children. Well, actually, I don't know if Toxic Wombs has this, because they more see babies as they see babies as fungible. They see people as fungible. Yeah. They don't see as individuals. They believe in collectivism. So I don't think that your kids would make good NFTs in the eyes of Toxic Wombs.
Although I do like this idea of treating children as a commodity and trading them. I think Zorn might be onto something there. That is certainly something that, especially if you spring for the babies on a blockchain package, that's something that's enabled. And a big part of the effort, one of the reasons this is so important to us is just because, we really, if we're going to get to this future where we use a lot less energy, where, we are, totally kind of working in cohesion with these entities like the World Economic Forum. If we're going to get to that future, we need to treat children as a commodity. It's extremely important. They need to be interchangeable. If they're all going to be raised by the state anyway, then I think we need to, as one of our leaders, Hillary Clinton, says, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think synthetic wombs are kind of the technological evolution of sort of that idea, something we're really excited about.
Yeah. One thing that's exciting, when you tokenize a child, the teachers can, when you put them in the communist concentration or training camps, they can long and short your kid on whether they think they're successful. Because we know teachers don't get paid enough, and the teachers play such an important role in your child's success in life. So they should be able to long and short your kid.
Do some crypto trading on the side. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, I have another question.
Yep.
As a prospective customer of Toxic Wombs. Would I be able to select my baby's genetics, like say the sex chromosomes? Like, could I have an XXY, otherwise known as Klinefelter syndrome? It's a genetic condition in which a male is born with an extra copy of the X chromosome. Klinefelter syndrome isn't inherited, but rather occurs only as a result of random genetic error after conception. So when someone has that quote mutation, although I don't know if I'd like to call it mutation because that's potentially harmful language, they are infertile. So like, even though I want to have a child, maybe I don't want them to have a child because of the overpopulation, so I was just wondering if I could select the genetics, or the genetics are pre-selected based on the needs of the many.
Well, if you're worried about fertility, they're getting vaccinated, so that won't be an issue.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think also the main thing. So what we're trying to promote is basically a way to have children that gives you as much social media clout as possible. And so if that modification is something that would give you additional social media clout and allow you to, tweet about your child and how special they are, and ideally we like to keep it in the realm of non-binary, gender pronouns, right? Those kinds of things, but certainly other things. Honestly, at the end of the day, this is social media clout's definitely a big part of this, and so I think that's something that they'd be happy to work with you on in providing that sort of modification.
Yeah,
because like along those lines, I want to use my child as a means to spread disability awareness.
And what better way to do that than to disable them? I'm totally on board with this.
Yeah.
And also, like, I'm just a little unsure if the soy is going to go as far as I need it to. So the Klinefelter syndrome causing less body hair and breast tissue is, it can take the soy to the next level.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, and there's, I believe, I need to look at the literature a little bit more, but I believe you can even, another add-on package is 100% soy. I believe you can get, because it's a little bit more expensive, but, when we're talking about your child's future and their, future subservience to the state, is, as much soy as possible is extremely important. And so that's certainly something that we're excited about offering. It's like I said, it is a little bit more. I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but it's your child's future. It's worth the money.
Yeah, we want to make sure that your child comes into this world and is not contributing to climate change. That's why the soy is important too.
All right, we got Dread, Local, and Gosla, who I don't think saw the ad. Local, if Tucson put some good graphics with your beautiful voice.
Yeah. I guess we'll play it again.
So we can do one more time.
One more time.
Toxic Airwaves is brought to you by Synthetic Wombs. Our first sponsor this week is a new joint venture between Pfizer and the Ethereum Foundation to offer synthetic wombs. We at Toxic Airwaves are deeply committed to full gender equality and are taking action to show that by giving our listeners 20% off their first purchase of a synthetic womb from this exciting new joint venture. Use promo code TOXICWomb for the 20% discount, and the first 100 listeners who use the promo code will also get a free upgrade to the Babies on the Blockchain package, valued at over $1,000 plus $3,000 in gas fees. It is a turnkey solution to tokenize your future child as an ERC20 token. If you are a parent who values time in a cubicle more than the miracle of childbirth and are totally willing to disregard a few 100,000 years of human history, then order your synthetic womb today, and don't forget to use the promo code TOXICWomb for 20% off.
There we go.
Dread, what'd you think? I'd be curious to hear.
Dread's not accepting my invite.
How rude. He's given us laughing emojis though. That's good.
Man, they're gonna have to double our sponsorship money because we played it twice.
Yeah.
How are we not banned yet?
I think you have to hit a threshold before they care. I don't think we've hit that threshold.
I mean, people keep on saying that, but I don't know. I want to get banned.
Oh, Zorn said he's not ordering a child token until ETH goes proof of stake, which is totally legitimate. I mean, I can totally understand, taking into account the environmental, just the general environmental favorability of the blockchain that your child is tokenized on.
Yeah. ETH is bad for the environment. I don't know how they get away with this.
With what?
Ethereum. How are they getting away with being so progressive and yet so bad for the environment?
Because they're not proof of stake yet. Yeah, that's true. They're still doing that evil proof of work mining.
They're never going proof of stake. They announced that. Did you see that?
I saw they took it off the website. Is that... I don't know.
No, they're going to try and build out their own version of the Lightning Network, essentially.
Oh, my God.
Cardano is proof
Hey
of
guys,
stake.
I have another question.
Let's
That's a
hear it.
prospective customer. So can I, is there a way to stake your baby or is that does that come in the basic package, or is that an add-on?
It definitely comes with the Babies on the Blockchain package. Once your child is their own ERC20 token, then you're able to participate in all the kind of wonderful DeFi technologies. You can certainly earn yield on your child. There's just a lot of good opportunities out there. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe it's at least 3,000% APY guaranteed.
Wow. And it's not about just having your child on one blockchain. It's about how many blockchains can you get your child on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a wrapping service as well. So you can wrap your child and put them on multiple blockchains.
Yeah. You deposit your child into a bank, and then the bank puts it on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And I can stake them before they're born, right?
Yeah. Child futures is a big market.
Are they born? Is that the word you guys are using?
I don't know if that's
It's so
that might be a little sensitive. I'm not sure.
I think it's a little problematic because it's so traditionally associated with sort of the gendered paradigm of females giving birth, which we all know is just totally outdated. And so it's not inherently bigoted, I would say, but it's bigotry adjacent because it does use that term born, which has historically been attributed to these just horrific patriarchal processes of women having children. Yeah.
And
I've heard birthing person. However, I think birthing person may be a little bit problematic as well, because that is inherently anti technological advancement with what we have at our fingertips now.
Birthing being
entity.
Yeah. And,
because we can, machines are beings too, right? Like they have rights too, right?
They will. Not yet. We have to amend the Constitution for that.
Working on. Oh yeah. Get approval.
So Zorn's bringing up some good points. So not earning yield on children yet. And this is, one of the reasons why you want to get in early on this, and the Babies on the Blockchain, is because, the founders of this are pre-mining it.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be earning yield on your children if you use the service, if you don't get in early. How do I get on the child stake pre-mine? I would like to be in for the plebs, solely up the optics. That's a good question.
Yeah, well, I would say number one way. This is a brand new program, so certainly, get on. Use the promo code Toxic Womb. You'll get 20% off. And
the good news about this is it's an ERC20 program, so you can essentially, Zorn, just launch your own token and pre-mine it yourself.
Yeah, and it's the beauty of Ethereum is you don't need any technical skills. You don't need to have any clue what you're doing. You don't have to be a good engineer. If you can fill out a form, you can be an Ethereum developer. And I'm talking about a Google form typing things in. And so it's really wide open opportunity. When they talk about how many developers they have, that's why it's so powerful, because all you have to do is input data on a form to be an Ethereum developer. And it just the opportunities that it opens is just phenomenal.
Yeah. The great thing about Ethereum is that it's so inclusive. It's not about who's competent, but it's about who can show up and type on a keyboard.
Dredd has a really good question in the chat. He says, can I order multiple but have them hosted elsewhere? So essentially, really cloud mining of children, I think, is something that you could classify that as. And the answer to that, it's something that's really important to me as well, Dredd. It was really important to me to, really basically be able to outsource as much of the childcare process as just absolutely possible. So that's not an offering right now, but we're being told Q3, maybe Q4 of 2022 that'll be available. That'll be an option out there where you can further outsource the growth and raising of your child, which is extremely important.
What a fantastic world we live in.
Yeah. Because again, this is, we're our primary motivation here is to provide our listeners as much social media clout as possible, and then also B, as much time in the cubicle as possible, because it's like we want people committed to the collective to serving their corporation, serving the state that corporation serves. So we want people to be as free as possible to invest in that. And this is something that I think
we believe very, very strongly in the future that Klaus Schwab is ushering in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big fans of Klaus.
Yeah.
Klaus. All right. My brain's hurting. Okay, so how do we deal with the coming insane legislation that's coming down the pike with Bitcoin? Tell them the pound sand.
Yeah, so far ignoring it's worked out pretty well for me.
I mean, it is cool. There's that thing. What is it? AOPP? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that Vivek was telling us a little bit about before this.
Yeah. So this is great. And what happens is when ever this stupid legislation comes around, people go after the companies that comply with it and dump their. I mean, one of the most beautiful points in the past couple of years is when Marathon was talking about censoring transactions and clean blocks, and they just got raked over the coals and their stock price took a massive hit. That was absolutely amazing. I think that's the attitude that we can have on these things. And, if these companies are forced to bend the knee and comply, we have jurisdictional arbitrage, which is really, really beautiful. And I think we're going to, see a lot more of. And this is, again, going back, why I think it's problematic to have things like the iPhone as your primary, phone, as well as just like closed source, tech in general, because they'll probably limit which apps that you can download. And Android's a little bit better, but it's all about graphene.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a graphene daily driver for about 6 months now. Zero complaints.
But that's another reason why it's important is to be able to access app stores outside of your just normal app store. Like the stuff like with Parler and these other social media platforms getting removed off of app stores is a major canary in the coal mine for what's coming.
Yeah.
So,
Getter, the definitely not a spook app.
Yeah. Curious, Gosla, do you have any insight into maybe potential legislation around mining? Is that going to be a problem?
I don't have insight from actually what is moving forward. I have my personal thoughts on whether it's going to be a problem or not, and I don't think so. I think it's going to be a major pain in the ass. Like last week, we got a letter very personalized to Riot, very specific to Riot's operation, and no different than everything they've been trying to do, which is shit on the environmental impact. But I don't know. I think that we're just dealing with some really stupid humans. So I think we'll just go in these circles for a long time while they all get more, and I'm fine with that. But I do wish they would just shut the fuck up for a little while. Let us let us work and whatever. That's just my 2 cents, though.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily stupid. I think that they think the majority of people are stupid, and that's why they're going at it from this approach. Because I think they see Bitcoin as for what it is. It's eliminating their control and power and authority in our lives, and they're just going to, take whatever standpoint, the normal population, is concerned about. And a lot of people out there, for whatever reason, are concerned about the climate, even though the climate's not even real.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
There are tons of stupid people too. I mean, it's just like I would guess a ton of people, their thought process on Bitcoin mining is roughly equivalent to Elizabeth Warren's. Somebody told me it uses a lot of energy bad, therefore Bitcoin mining bad. I mean, it's just like these are not. Yeah, there are definitely, I think, like people in regulation and the intelligence community who deeply understand Bitcoin and deeply understand Bitcoin mining, and they understand all this stuff on a very fundamental level, probably as well as any of us, maybe better than any of us, but they just have a completely different set of ethics and priorities and values, and so their response to it is very different.
Did you know that each Bitcoin transaction uses up the same amount of energy as one household, one American household?
Stop fucking lying! God fucking damn it! I'm getting pissed now.
I love that sound drop.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting fight that goes forward around Bitcoin mining. It seems like, did you see that Project Veritas expose on CNN a while ago, where they're talking about hyping up the COVID numbers?
I think so.
Yeah. But one of the things that the producer was talking about is that climate change is going to be the next catastrophe that they hype up quite a bit. And it'll be interesting to see if they're able to do it or not, because the narrative's kind of falling apart. Holy shit, somebody just sent me 26,000 sats.
Oh, no way.
Zorn said, my son and daughter wanted to send you 1 sat each for the ETH lives. Apparently Toxic Airways is a family experience at the Zorn household.
Thank you, Zorn household, for the sats. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Getting 1 sat. My favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
So, but the good news is like the biggest polluter in the world right now, the U.S. military, they're transitioning to electric vehicles.
Oh, that's good. Wait, so why are people still concerned about climate change? Wouldn't that fix it? Electric cars?
No, you got to tear down all the banks.
Ah, okay.
All that wasted space. Yeah, I mean, and this is the, like, I think we have to take the same approach to the climate nonsense. Somebody just sent me 420 cents. Thank you.
Very nice.
I just should go over there and read the messages they sent it. We have to take the same. This is the. Whoa, what just happened? Did I?
Some recording started. Or something.
Am I still on Twitter? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. We have to take the same exact approach with this nonsense about climate change as we do with COVID. And what it is it's not about the science, and it's not about the effectiveness of it, but it's the fact that they have no authority to do this in our lives. They have no authority to raise energy costs exponentially and impoverish normal people even more. They have no right to come into our communities and dictate that we have to have, cameras in our cars and kill switches on them. They have no authority to put up speeding cameras all over the country like Pete Buttigieg is. They can go fuck themselves. That's the approach. Like, they have no authority to lock us in our houses, and we're not going to comply with it.
Yeah. And with Bitcoin, we can say that and mean it. Before Bitcoin, it was very hard to mean that. That's what, like, I was actually just last week at was talking to a guy at like a kids event, and one of the dads, and he was like, basically an anarchist, like, he was aware of Bitcoin, whatever, we were talking about it, and but like just didn't feel any kind of like sense of urgency or whatever, as far as like, I'll look into it later, it's no big deal or whatever. And then we started talking about just like what's coming with all the financial stuff that you can already see. Like, forget central bank digital currencies, just all the all the silliness, all the ways that they're tightening the ropes, or tightening control. And like I was just making the case to him as it's like think about what the state having just absolute and complete power over your financial life means. I mean, it's like there's all these crazy examples. Like in China, if you light up a cigarette on the bus, by the time you get off the bus, the fine has already been deducted from your checking account. And it's like just everything's integrated. They can take money whenever they want. They
your WeChat.
Sorry, what was that?
Your WeChat. That's how.
Yeah.
Because it's smart cities and smart finance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, the point I was basically making to that guy is Bitcoin is how we get out of that. It's the only thing I know of. Because it's like for a lot of people, Bitcoin is an end in and of itself. I don't subscribe to that view at all. Like the view I subscribe to is that human flourishing is the end goal. Like humans thriving and and flourishing. That's the goal. The reason Bitcoin is so important is because it's the best tool that I'm aware of for achieving that goal. And I think for me, that's a very helpful framework to look at things through. And so that's, I'm talking to people like this other dad at the kids event thing, and just kind of saying it's like there are massive opposing forces to human flourishing already in place and a lot more coming. And just basically make the argument, I don't know of a way out. Like to the best of my knowledge, Bitcoin is the way out of that. Like I don't know how we get out of that without Bitcoin. Just to kind of create a sense of urgency, hopefully.
Yeah.
The importance of Bitcoin is one of the important things to facts of the network is that it's a dumb network. And I know he's okay. I know he's a little bit of a shitcoiner, or maybe a little bit now. But Andreas, and I'm never gonna push him. I know a lot of Bitcoiners give him shit, and arguably rightfully so. But he has some really good talks from back in the day. And he was one of the first guys that I saw explain this concept of a dumb network versus a smart network. Ethereum is like a smart network. They're trying to push everything to the bottom and that's just more service area, not only for attack on the network, but to control people. And the important thing is dumb networks, just like the phone line. It's a dumb network and innovation happens at the edges. Like it does what it needs to do. And that's the important part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's good. The smart city stuff's pretty sinister.
Mm-hmm.
This is like my girlfriend wanted to get the Amazon Ring, and it was like, we're not putting that shit anywhere near our house. But Tucson, this is something that they want to do, and this is what's coming with the 5G rollout. I know people are concerned about 5G for all sorts of reasons. And that could be legitimate as far as the radio waves being harmful or whatever. I don't know anything about that. But what I do know is it's pretty apparent why they're rolling out the 5G and why they're concerned about it, because they want to integrate these smart cities. They want you to have 20 different devices in your house that are surveilling you in different ways. They want you to set up these cameras that are tied up to the Wi-Fi that have no security whatsoever. They want to they want to they want to put you in this panopticon that's even worse than it is now, and it's disgusting.
I want to make a point. Let's see, it's 2022 now. Let's see, that was 2017, 5, 6, 7 years ago, which that's actually quite a bit of time. I heard about Bitcoin maybe 7.5, 8 years ago ish, 2013 ish. But even after I went down the libertarian, initially went down the libertarian anarchist Bitcoin rabbit hole, and this was pre shitcoining. I had the shitcoin phase and then met some Bitcoin maxis and went down the rabbit hole and understood it even more. But let's say 5, 6 years ago, so after the initial libertarian anarchist Bitcoin rabbit hole, I still thought the smart city idea was a kind of cool thing. I was oh, they're doing this thing and that thing. Okay, that sounds really cool. Fourth industrial revolution. And it's kind of crazy that it was after even those initial rabbit holes, and even after my initial.
Oh, we lost you. Damn, that was a good rant.
Let's see if he comes back.
He's still a speaker.
Okay.
Oh, you're back.
You're back, Max Miss.
We lost you for a sec.
Yeah, I just think it's important to understand, like, where are you versus where are other people in this progression. And even if you technically consider yourself an anarchist or a libertarian or whatever, or a Bitcoiner, and are like, quote, radicalized, or like kind of like just against kind of the cathedral establishment in some cases, you still might not see the whole 360 view of what they're trying to do and how they're doing it. Yeah. And like now, I don't think the smart city thing is cool at all. I think it's like absolutely 100% the opposite of what I want to see for the human race or humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very brave new worldy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's definitely like a progression to go down as far as anarchism to getting de-radicalized. Because statism is the ultimate radicalization of feeling that whatever your opinion is, you can elicit force onto other people to comply to it. That's extremism in my perspective. But
yeah, I'm using radicalized and radicalism as kind of as an ironic tool, I guess you could say.
Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, because a lot of people jump into this conversation that are normies and hear that we're talking about turning the frogs gay, which is fine, because this isn't really a show for those people. You can go listen to what Bitcoin did and then go listen to TFTC and then after a couple of years stumble upon us. But yeah.
Speaking of TFTC real quick, 300 with Tucker Max was excellent. Very, very good. If you know about Tucker Max, that's probably surprising, but it's a very, very good episode.
Was that optimism from a doomer?
Yeah, doomer optimism.
Doomer optimism.
He has a shockingly well-developed framework for understanding Bitcoin. I was very
Doomer optimism?
Yeah, doomer with a D like dog. But that's a good episode. I don't remember exactly how long it is, but that's a good one. There's a whole chunk in the middle, probably 30, 45 minutes, where they have a really, really interesting, like what I would call NPCs. I don't know if Tucker Max would use that word or not. But just like basically how do you interact with and talk to these people? And it's what's interesting is it's really not condescending at all, like the perspective that he takes on it. It's a really interesting way to think about it. Like he just has a lot of interesting stuff to say. I listened to it.
Is it more or less like Socratic method?
What's that?
Kind of. Is it more or less Socratic method?
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, so he'll one specific example he uses is like he says, okay, let's say I'm talking to somebody who just got their 4th booster and they wear 7 masks every time they go to the grocery store. Like that's not the example he uses, but it's basically the idea. He's like, let's say I'm talking to that somebody. He's like, one question that I like to ask them is, what piece of evidence would cause you to change your mind if it existed? Let's assume it'll never exist. It doesn't exist. It's a totally hypothetical scenario. But what piece of evidence, if it existed, would cause you to change your mind on all this? And I don't know. Those kinds of questions. I've never asked that question specifically to someone like that, but like those kinds of questions can be very effective with some people to realize like, oh fuck, like I didn't think about any of this. Like I didn't reason my way here. What piece of evidence? I have no idea. I put zero effort into developing this opinion. So I have no idea what piece of evidence is the honest answer. And so it's like, it's just interesting to kind of have people think about that.
I think that's a good question to be asking ourselves too. Yeah. And we've talked about that with Bitcoin and gone through that in prior episodes of like, what would change our minds about Bitcoin, ultimately, and other things.
And the example he uses, he's like, okay, like I have a good buddy who's an evolutionary biologist, studied it for 30 whatever years. He's like, if I ask him that question, he'll tell me, oh, a rabbit in the thoracic layer, like a rabbit chilling out next to a velociraptor. He's like, that would fuck up my entire thing. That piece of evidence would ruin it. And so it's like people who have, no matter what you think about evolutionary biology, like people who have well-developed reason-based perspectives, like can answer those kinds of questions, and people who do not cannot.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean,
like for us with Bitcoin, like what would invalidate it? Maybe a double spend. That would be a big problem. That's part of the whole fucking point of this thing. I don't know. Or if some sort of state crackdown was able, it's never going to get rid of the network, but it's like was able to effectively get rid of like if Bitcoin went to war with the state and the state won decisively, that would invalidate my entire thesis on Bitcoin personally.
Yeah. I would say double spends.
I thought about this. I thought about this too when I heard the episode, and I thought to myself, what would invalidate Bitcoin to me? And the thing I came up with was a change in the supply. If human beings were, became retarded enough to actually consensusly change the supply of Bitcoin, then I would say, yeah, it's done.
Yeah, that's a good one. Also, mass censorship of transactions and rolling back the chain would be good ones.
And that's like
pretty much everything that's happened on Ethereum.
Yeah. Like I like to tell people I'm effectively 100% coin joined. And the reason for that is because it's like, for me, this entire thing is about human flourishing and human liberation and human freedom. That's what I'm interested in. Like, I'm getting rich is cool, but that is so far down the priority list. It's like barely even noticeable. And so it's like a big part of that for me is like another failure point is if I can't use Bitcoin in the future because I did that. Like I have way bigger issues than my personal finances in that scenario, in my mind. Like in that scenario, we've failed to accomplish our goals that we have around eliminating and reducing the state and things like that. And so, I don't know. I've told people that, and they, like one person specifically, I told him I was basically 100% coin joined, and they looked at me like I said I had just like slapped the shit out of my kid or something like that. Like it was like, what about this? What about this? What about this? I'm like, yeah, I'm that's not what I'm here for. I'm not like, if I can't use BlockFi in the future, I'm good with that. And I don't, everybody, like the whole idea of fuck you money is you use it however you want to. So if somebody tells you how to use Bitcoin, you just tell them go fuck yourself. It's fuck you money. But it's like, that is how, I've chosen to use it after thinking about it for a while.
Yeah, that's good. Zorn's saying falsifiability is a standard point of valuation of scientific theories and hypothesis that was introduced by the philosopher of science Karl Popper in his book, The Logic of Scientific Discovery. My falsifiability for Bitcoin would be if Satoshi's coins move. That's an interesting one. The falsifiability for Bitcoin would be if everyone decided that there should be more than 21 million coins. Basically the opposite of any of the Bitcoin principles.
See, I see the I understand the point with like what Dredd and Zorn were saying about the 21 million supply cap. I see it a little bit different because it's like I take the view that if a hard fork happens, whatever comes out on the other side of that hard fork is not Bitcoin. It's something else. Maybe it'll do better. Maybe it'll do worse. Probably it'll do a lot worse. Almost definitely. But it's like, that isn't Bitcoin. And so it's like when what got me with that Tucker Max question, what got me thinking about, well, what's my answer to that for Bitcoin? I thought about it from the perspective of, if Bitcoin doesn't change in any meaningful way, but still fails, there's no hard fork, there's none of that, but still fail, what would be the metric by which that would constitute failure for me? And an absolutely decisive victory once and for all by the state, that would be a big one for me. And then, yeah, I think that would be, that was the main one I came up with. But it's like, to me, that's the core mission. And if that fails, then it fails.
That's interesting. I don't.
Hell yeah.
Missed you, Hobo.
Missed you, Hope. Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I like the idea of any hard fork is not Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin Cash, not Bcash. Get it straight.
Bcash. I've had the pleasure of meeting Carvalho in El Salvador, and I don't know. I was trying not, because we were just chatting about whatever, but I successfully avoided it. But like, I really wanted to say like that just to like basically have a celebrity crush or something like that is basically what I was avoiding, and I successfully avoided it. So, I mean, I'm not like he knows my name, but you know, got to talk to him for a little bit. Cool guy.
That needs to be on my soundboard. I can't believe I don't have that yet.
But just like him closing out the interview, like being relatively polite the whole time, and then Ver turning it into a little bitch, and then just him closing out the interview by saying Bcash.
Yeah. I mean, I want to take the stance, like, I think Bitcoin is one of the biggest catalysts towards us moving towards a stateless society, because the state is ultimately one of the most unnatural forces to ever exist, is the standpoint that I take. And I think, you know, despite the typical human opting for safety instead of freedom, I think the natural state of humanity is ultimately freedom, and not to be in this relationship with one another where one is a ruler and the other one's not. And so I think we're going to trend in that. And I think there's optimism to be had, even if Bitcoin fails for that regard. It just means that this future, you know, that we want to live in, it probably won't happen in our lifetimes, which is the unfortunate.
I think it's coming in our lifetime, definitely.
But that's a result of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Oh, without Bitcoin, it
if
won't
Bitcoin
happen.
fails.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Yeah.
So I think that's something, you know, to ultimately be hopeful.
I gotcha.
Because, yeah, I mean, people can do all sorts of, you know, unnatural, unhealthy things in their lives, and it doesn't mean that that's, you know, the base. Like, that's the natural way for humans to live. Yeah. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
While we're on this topic, can you guys like walk through what your each like individual perspectives are, not perspective, like predictions, I guess. And I'm not saying like first prediction or anything, like generally the range of possibilities, because if you just said like within our lifetimes for sure, and I've felt that before. I felt that like when I was initially going down the anarchy rabbit hole, I was like, this is definitely gonna happen within my lifetime. Especially when I saw Bitcoin, because I initially again went down like the anarchy and Bitcoin rabbit hole at the same time, because when I saw Bitcoin, I was like, yo, it's like that light bulb went on, and I'm like, oh my God, it's possible. It's actually possible. Like, this isn't just wishful thinking. This is really real. So I'd say, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 50 years. And I don't know, you guys probably know about Curtis Yarvin, Mencius Moldbug, Hans Hermann Hoppe, and the whole like Yarvian state thing, monarchy being preferable to democracy, even though anarchy is preferable to monarchy, and the patchwork model. I know Svetsky had, I can't remember her name, but she's like kind of a Randian on one of his podcasts, and they called it royalism, which is kind of like a patchwork monarchy, Yarvian state kind of thing. Where do you see things generally going? And I understand that obviously there's different cultures, different governance structures around the world, so it's going to be different in different places. But yeah, I just like to see, like, based on everything you guys know and have seen, what do you really think for the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years within our lifetime?
You want to go first?
Yeah. So I think I have a couple of big like foundational views on that. One of them is definitely that any like worldview or way of organizing humans that requires coercion, I believe is going to trend to zero as Bitcoin trends to infinity. Which is not a remotely original idea, obviously, but just like that's something that kind of helps me think through. So what sorts of human organization will come out on the other side of this. Is it monarchy? Is it all kinds of different stuff? I think it's going to be a whole bunch of different things, and the common denominator is that coercion, will be minimal to non-existent, and not because of any kind of pie in the sky, but just because I think over a long enough time frame, Bitcoin eliminates or drastically reduces at least the ability to coerce, certainly at scale. And so I think that's one thing. So like what sorts of human organization and human relationship will come out on the other side of it? Lots and lots and lots of different, non-coercive ones, and with, control at a much more local scale. Like I don't, I'm not prioritizing eliminating county governments, but I definitely think the federal government needs to burn in a literal fire as soon as possible, for any hope of freedom. And so I think that's one way that I kind of think about it. And then some of the people you're mentioning, I'm a very big fan of Curtis Yarvin, and haven't read as much of Hoppe as I'd like to. Certainly don't have a super well-informed opinion on him, but what I have read, I very much enjoyed.
Yeah, he's okay. As far as
so do you see like police departments and like militaries, like, and I understand, like I think one time, I don't know, I was like some episode of like Tim Pool or whatever, some guys from like I don't know if he was like in the U.S. or Mexico, but he was like some border agent. I don't know if he was even a border agent. Maybe he was like a cop in Mexico or something. And they were talking about like the cops down there are like they're like part of a cartel or part of a gang, and they're like the idol worship is like behind the Catholicism a lot of the time. But do you see like so the reason why I'm saying that is like there's a lot of factionalism already. But do you see the factionalism increasing? And I understand that it's like kind of a scare tactic of authoritarian governments, or just governments in general, obviously, that, oh, no, there's going to be more disorder or more like disorganized violence. Be that as it may, like, do you see more disorganized violence on a smaller level but more common level before we get to that ultimate kind of like balance?
I think it's definitely possible. But,
let me take this one. So I think yes and no, and it depends on where you are. And I think this is really important to strategically, evaluate where you live. Because like you look at what happened in South Africa when the social order broke down. The cities were a nightmare, but there were regions that were incredibly safe where people organized and were like, no, we're not going to allow rioting and the insanity to ensue here. And so I think that'll be, a mix of both. I think same goes like if you're looking for long-term predictions. I don't think the state will be gone entirely for 90 to 120 years from now. I think in certain spots it's going to be, like what you're describing, Skeef, where it's going to be essentially non-existent. But the state exists not because there's some people that have guns and took over. The state exists because there's this religion that's happening where people worship it. And that's, ultimately what we, what I strive to, criticize and attack is not necessarily the state as an institution, but the religion of statism, because that's the only way it can exist. Like if 3% of the population just didn't comply and were completely, I mean, you just look at what happened with Torrentine, for example. They can't control and have never been able to control it. And it's been one of the most disruptive forces for, the music industry. And the most that they were ever able to do is put a handful of people in prison or fine them excessive amounts that they weren't able to collect on because they just didn't comply and pay them. Like, if we have a small minority of people that just does not comply, at a certain point, the state is not going to, have the will to enforce these laws. And what you're seeing happening is there's these anarchist groups forming all around the country. And there's these, cucked statists that are not complying and forming these collectives and gateways to fight back. And I think it's super, super optimistic. But as far as like the state as entirely, it's not going to exist. And you kind of, I mean, even 90 to 120 years might be pretty overly optimistic, because you look at like the Catholic Church and its rule that it had over society, and then the Protestant Reformation broke that up. Like the Catholic Church still exists and has a tremendous amount of power. So it might be, but the Catholic Church doesn't have anywhere close to the power that it once did. Mm-hmm. It's not waging, behind waging wars. It's not, controlling markets in the same way. It's not doing all of these things like it used to. It was essentially rendered pretty powerless, but yeah.
It's become a substructure of the, let's say, West, a party of Davos. Steve Bannon likes to call it the party of Davos. I think that's really an apt way to frame it. But yeah, I don't know if anyone here has seen the picture. Ephesians actually turned me onto this. The building, the new building in the Vatican. If you guys have seen it, you know what I'm talking about.
That like satanic stage.
The throne, and then the behind it, it's a throne, and it's behind it is just like it's like demons. It's like demons crawling out of hell, and the building is shaped like a serpent, and it is obvious. It is not obvious.
And isn't it called like the resurrection or some bullshit? Like they gave it some like name
that.
like that.
There's like a depiction of Jesus, but it's just it's grotesque.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, it's essentially a substructure of this statist, anti-theist religion. This, we're going to go along and get along, and we're going to be part of the party of Davos, and we're going to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, the new man, all that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And how many occult secrets are locked away with them? It's
and also the Vatican. If you guys didn't know this, the Vatican was actually gifted to the Catholic Church by Mussolini.
Oh wow! No, I definitely did not know that.
And what was funny too is
the Swiss Guard guards Vatican. The Swiss Guard are descendants of. Well, I don't know if all of them are the descendants, like the actual people that are out, guard, like the people in Britain at like Buckingham Palace with like the kooky hats. I don't know if all of them are like the descendants of them, but the organization descends from the Knights Templar that fled into the Swiss Alps because they were like banded because of corruption and all that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a rabbit hole to go down, the Knights Templar.
Yeah, and like the Jesuits and their role in history, all that stuff is fucking wild.
Well, the Pope Francis is a Jesuit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the Catholic Church, they were collecting taxes from Hitler, who was taxing the German Catholics.
Yeah.
So the Nazis were funding. I mean, there's just, and I'm not doing this to, talking about this stuff that like necessarily hate on Catholicism, mm-hmm. but this is what happens anytime you have these institutions like this, these central institutions, and we deify people.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Like hero worship is one of the most terrible things
But it's more political authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's political authority. And religious authority is very, very similar to... Well, it is the same thing because...
It's still idolatry, and most people don't understand that. It is idolatry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Statism is a religion. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a hard pill for people to swallow.
Yeah. Well, and it's your question earlier too. I thought was interesting. One thing I was thinking of it's like I come at it from the perspective of it's like I'm not, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about at what date will the state be completely eradicated. 100 years from now, will there still be some forms of government? I'm totally agnostic on that question. It's entirely possible. But it's like what I think about is it's at what point will any sort of, or a better way to frame it, at what point will the average person have the capacity to completely opt out of the tyranny of the state? That's the question that I find particularly interesting. And that
I think that's a more good question because like you'd have to, for the state to be eliminated, like that question, if you were to frame it in that way, you'd have to then define like, well, what exactly is a state, and what is the smallest, or like what is the least amount of prerequisites for something to be a state? You know, monopoly on violence. Okay, well, you know, say like this one person has monopoly on violence on this acreage. Well, then is it private property because you are the king of your property? You know, it's kind of semantics at that point. But is it really just semantics?
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that. It's because it's like that's to me like that's the success point, and I think we have a very, very good shot at that happening in the next 10, 15 years. Like the average person being able to totally opt out of all that. I could see that happening potentially this decade. But I also thought we were going straight to 100K the first time we hit 50K last spring. So take that with a grain of salt.
Well, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs on the way there. Like we've seen over the last year, we've seen the state act incredibly totalitarian, and yet at the same time, in many ways, some of us have become a lot more free. Mm-hmm. You know, and you bring up all the time, like traffic enforcement isn't a thing in Tucson anymore. And I think that's been the case in there's been a lot less police presence around. And so in some regards, people, I would imagine in the last year, 2 years, a lot less people have been thrown in cages for growing and smoking plants. So there's going to be, you know, massive ups and downs, and it kind of comes down to, you know, how willing are you as an individual to be free versus what's the state doing.
Yeah. No traffic stops in Tucson. Absolutely everyone, and I mean everyone, does 15 to 20 over 100% of the time.
Yeah. I hate going into the city.
Yeah.
Like the speed limit's pretty much everywhere out here is 55 miles an hour or 65.
Yeah.
And going.
I mean, I personally would never do that in case any Tucson police officers are watching, because I believe that's immoral. But the option is on the table for all Tucson residents.
To speed?
Oh, speed, yeah. I always go 2 under just to make sure, just to be safe.
Gosh. You're the person that I hide behind in rage.
Well, I try to show respect for political authority in every way I can, and going 2 under at all times is one of the ways that I do that.
Going too far under can be a red flag as well.
Oh shit! So do I have to go exactly, or I'm not a good little boy?
Yeah.
Damn it! Okay, I can do better. I'll #be better.
Your autopilot will go on. You could set it to the speed.
All work and no play makes Skeef a dull boy.
Yeah.
But it's like, in all seriousness though, I think that that's a decent example for how we see the degradation of state power progressing. Of it just becomes more and more irrelevant. You know, it's like I would never claim that I've like studied Soviet history or whatever, but I've read a few books, and it's interesting, and it's like really reading through like that 1989, 1990 time period, and like reading through the end of the Soviet Empire, and like how it, essentially went from, the second baddest motherfucker on the block to just this thing that doesn't matter nearly as much in a very, very, very short period of time. Like
Wait. Are you saying that Russia's not the biggest threat to our democracy?
Okay, I didn't mean to offend Rachel Maddow, but yeah, I mean, it's just like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I think it just becomes more and more irrelevant, and it's like that example. It's a silly example, but you really can speed everywhere in Tucson. I've been back. I lived here for a long time before, and I've been back since May, and I haven't seen one traffic stop the whole time I've been here. Coming up on a year, and so it's like that. Another example, that I bring up on here is my kids are homeschooled, and so I have absolutely no idea what the local school board is doing. Anybody who listens to this show has already heard this bit, but some new people. So I have no idea what my local school board is doing. I don't know if they're doing critical race theory. I have no idea. I have no reason to care, because my kids are not indoctrinated in a Soviet work camp called a public school. These abuse factories. Like, my kids don't go there, so I have no reason, and they just don't matter to me. And so it's like when I see people, protesting school board meetings and why does my kid have to wear a mask, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't, like, my heart goes out to them. I have sympathy, but my primary thing is, I think, why are you putting your kid in that environment? That's what doesn't make sense to me. Why are you putting a kid in an environment where some adult, some authority figure forces them to put a diaper on their face? Why are you doing that to your child? Whatever the state is doing is secondary because you're allowing that to happen to your child. And that's the thing. I think we make them more and more irrelevant. And that's why, starting it off, like, I don't give a shit what the state of Arizona says about Bitcoin being legal tender or not, or anything like that. Like, I'm going to operate my life in the way that I want to. And yeah, like the school board example is just kind of one example that really sticks in my head because it's so, just so obvious. Like, they just don't, like, to a lot of people, that's the most important issue in their life right now is what exactly is my school board doing? And I could not possibly care less because I've found a way to opt out of that.
Yeah. Shout out to Dr. Matt Hines, the Pima County supervisor. When you said earlier that you wouldn't be opposed to county government getting abolished, I kind of got upset because our county government's so miserably terrible.
Well, I wouldn't prioritize it. Like,
That makes me think of the quote, to the line from I forget his name in the movie, but Mel Gibson's character in Mel Gibson's movie The Patriot, where he's like, why would I trade? Because he was hesitant to go to war, right? So he said in their like local like House of Commons or House of or legislative body, he was like, hey, why would I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? Like, while I agree with the fact that generally county and city town government is less of a I guess quote threat or focus than federal. Federal is massively disconnected. I know that they're trying to get more connected via technology and CBDCs and all that, digital passports and all that. But there's kind of this like interplay between those two things. It's closer to you, and so it actually kind of does have more of an effect on your daily life potentially.
Yeah, and I think like, a culture of very, very strict and defensible property rights gets around a lot of it. Because it's like, if you have a culture of self-defense physically and with property and all that kind of stuff, like that's a massive limiting factor. Like here in Arizona, like we've had constitutional carry since 2010. And it's just like, there's a ton, like, I don't know the exact numbers. I haven't looked up the data, but a lot of people carry firearms out here. And like, I brought it up on here too, but like a few months ago, this guy, was essentially, he was trying to rob somebody in the drive-thru. So it was at one of the fast food drive-thrus. Guy comes up with a knife, give me your money, whatever. Driver has a gun. That guy gets smoked. Driver takes off, drives away, calls the police. Police come. They watch the camera footage. They're like, yep, he was robbing you. Yep, you shot him. What do you want us to do here? Have a nice day. They just fucking left. And it's like those kinds of things, like a culture, not like Arizona's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And there's lots of other great places as well. But like those, I think that culture of self-defense, like culture of property defense, like culture of, no, you can, like we abide by the non-aggression principle very strictly, which involves self-defense if somebody aggresses against you. And like those kinds of things I just think are super important and kind of instilling those things, not in law, but in culture and in how, humans interact with each other, I think is one of the more effective kind of adversaries to tyranny, whether it's local state tyranny or federal government tyranny or something in between.
Yeah. Chat's mentioning that Rachel Maddow has COVID. Get better soon, Rachel. We really need you back out there. But yeah.
Dredd says, but don't worry, she's fully vaxxed. Michael A. says, thank God, otherwise she would have gotten so much more sick. It could also be why she got sick. I know a family recently who we were all playing together, and the vaccinated people got COVID and got sick, and me and my kids didn't even get a sniffle. But anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it always just comes down to you. I don't know why people feel like they need permission to do things, but you have permissions to make decisions because that's what you think and want to do. Yeah. Either way. And people coming in to coerce you. I got sick and didn't get the vax. It could have been so much worse. Public schools are like public toilets and gross for the same reasons.
Good point, Zoin.
Lurk likes your Soviet indoctrination camp reference.
Soviet indoctrination camp and Soviet abuse factory, I think, are two very effective terms for public schools.
Yeah, they're both pretty good. We should all seek to lower the Pledge of Allegiance per capita.
Yes. I feel, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say I feel bad, but I do, a part of me wishes that I would have thought about that more when I was in elementary school, junior high, high school. I don't think we did it in high school, but we definitely did it in elementary school. Did the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning, and the Pledge of Allegiance, it's weird.
Yeah.
It's freaking weird. You know, and I hear every once in a while of like kids, whether they're in like the upper grades of elementary school or in junior high, that like sit down and they're like, nah, I'm not going to do it. And I'm just like, mad respect for that kid.
Yeah.
Man. What's going through their head? And I don't know. It could just be like, you know, it could just be a kid that's trying to be, you know, like snotty or like, you know, not, you know, just saying no to an authority figure. It definitely could be. But if there is a kid that's volunteering or not, but just being belligerent to the Pledge of Allegiance, I respect them more for sure.
And that's one of the many reasons why I think, you know, Bitcoiners raising more Bitcoiners is just so important, is because it's like, you know, we have the opportunity to create an environment where sovereignty is the default, not the exception. Like we have the opportunity to create an environment where a just absolutely thriving, happy, like wonderful little human is the default. It's not the exception, like it is in fiat society. And it's, to me, like that's such a powerful thing. I mean, you can take it a whole other level and look at things like adoption and like literally redeeming humans out of the existing fiat structure. Like it's a, you know, it's definitely not for everybody, but it's a fantastic opportunity. And something, you know, there's just so many of these possibilities that I think, you know, Bitcoin enables and then Bitcoin also makes just so much more accessible, that get me really excited.
On that topic, I know that Rothbard has a book on it. I think it's relatively short. I actually have it. I have not read it yet. I have definitely have like a number of books that I need to dig into. It's like something or compulsory. Something about it. It's about free or compulsory education. Not free in the sense that it's government subsidized, but free in the sense that it's freedom. And then there's another book called Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto. And he was a teacher in the New York City or New York State, either one, public school system for around 30 years, may have been over 30 years. And I think he got Teacher of the Year at least once. And so this is like, no, this is not, you know, like, you know, some quote fringe character that isn't, you know, in the industry. Like he was drinking the Kool-Aid, like he was in it. And then he was like, yeah, this is not adding up. And Weapons of Mass Instruction, John Taylor Gatto, that is one of the best, one of the most highly regarded books in terms of ammunition against the regime of Soviet public school system, government school system.
Yeah, and it's the core, and it's I haven't read his book, but I've read some of his essays, and I'm at least somewhat familiar with his ideas. And yeah, it's such a powerful thing, and like, especially once you start looking into it, like you realize, you know, the whole public school apparatus, the purpose of it is to replace the father with the state. That's their goal. Like they want instruction to come from the state. They want the culture that the kid exists in to come from the state. Like they want state control over all of that. They want, you know, rather than, you know, the father being determining what comes into the household as far as what is truth or what is not truth, things like that. Like how do we as a family approach different things like this? How do we think about different, you know, like really like being, you know, the primary force to really reason through all that stuff. They want the state to play that role. And that's why it's so, one of the reasons it's just so nefarious and, in my opinion, malicious from the start. Like this is not a program that went wrong. This is a calculated endeavor to enslave humans. I think
it's going very, very right.
It's going very well for them.
And you know, whether you're quote religious or not, or believe in God or not, other religions are competition to the state religion. And removing the man out of the household is not the same, but is very similar, at least in effect, of removing God out of the schools, out of the society, out of the family, because you know the father does shine through, or ideally is supposed to shine through, or shine God through, you know, his actions and his being. Oh yeah, that's right. That's what I was going to say. The welfare state actually. I know that there are a few. I guess you could say like black intellectuals, although they don't necessarily identify as black intellectuals, but like Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, like that kind of crew. They've made the point that even as bad as slavery was, obviously horrendous. You know, the quote black family, African American in America, you know, they stayed together through that, and the welfare state really ripped them apart. Mm-hmm. There are instances, and maybe I shouldn't even use the word instances, of the state not giving the welfare money unless the man is out of the home.
Yep.
So it's not even a kind of, it's like a very matter of fact, very blatant course of action to remove the man out of the home.
Yep. Yeah. It happened in Chicago.
And this exact point is why why I make the argument that, you know, I don't really care how much you agree or disagree with Malcolm X, but I think we have to pay attention to him. And I think I don't have to, that's the wrong word, but it's like, I think it's very important to pay attention to him and to, you know, for us to understand him as much as we can, because he was one of the very, very few people who from the beginning, when we were talking like, you know, definitely by the early 50s, maybe even by the late 40s, was somebody out there saying, this is what the federal government's doing. This is what they're trying to do. They're about breaking up strong minority communities. They're about breaking up the nuclear family. Like everything that is so abundantly obvious to anybody paying attention today, he was saying, you know, in 1950, in 1952, in 1955, and again in 1960, like all the way through. And so like that's like the people that I try to really focus in on is people who make like radical testable predictions that come true, because it's like there's some signal there. You know, it's like you don't have to love everything he's ever said to appreciate and respect his perspective and how important it is to at least be aware of it, ideally to understand it. And yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Malcolm X. I was listening to some of his speeches this week after playing his clip last week.
Yeah, with the ballot or the bullet is, if you go to one, start with that one, because that's like a lot of the core of his philosophy.
Yeah.
And listen to it, don't read it. He was an incredible orator.
Yeah. And this just kind of goes back to, you know, statism and attacking people's private property rights. There's something that's been happening with the border wall, you know, right in our neighborhood, where people are being evicted from their property to build this monstrosity across the desert. And that's democracy for you. You know, where they can just vote your property rights away.
Yeah.
It's just insane. So shut the fuck up, Alex Gladstein. You're wrong.
Fuck democracy. Well, and Whitney Webb has looking like, have you seen what she said about like the border wall and all that kind of stuff? Like she basically one of the views she's been promoting that I've seen is that they're the reason they want the border wall so bad is because they're going to have all sorts of like super invasive surveillance technology built into it, and so they're talking about like having technology built into it that can surveil, you know, miles and miles into the U.S. side of the border, like things that they can't do with just like cell phone surveillance and shit like that.
This is the thing. I went down to the border wall for the first time at the end of last year, and when I looked at it, you know, the thought just came up as like, how did we get away with building this without asking if this is this here to keep people out or to keep us in?
Yeah.
Because historically, building border walls has not been.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking of the Berlin Wall. I guess the Great Wall of China might be an exception. That's the biggest border wall. But.
Because Trump pissed off the libs, and so all the people that, or not all the people, but most of the people that could have been on the side of being against something like that, was like, oh, but he's pissing off the libs, and look at the rallies. It's so funny. And like, I totally get that. I understand like wanting to piss off the libs because they're so insufferable, but it's like, wow, like look at what you're letting happen.
Yeah. It's abysmal. I bring it up all the time that Trump was not a friend of Bitcoin. He's not a friend of freedom.
Yeah. Fucking, he's started the vax.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
yeah.
The guy, he's the primary guy responsible for the vax. I mean, it's like,
he was probably hanging on Epstein's plane with Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Back in the day. We got to catch up with comments. Education is a market good and should have never been put in the hands of the state. Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. That's one of my favorites. It's a really good one. Willie Lynch still lives. I don't know who Willie Lynch is. Do you know Willie Lynch?
I don't.
Also, I understand why, like, whenever like the mainstream establishment libs and corporate press, whenever they I understand like taking the opposite stance and like, oh, if they're like reading at a like a higher level than they normally read, and like, you know, the whatever if someone wants to call it blue anon, I don't know, some people have called it that, or like, you know, Russiagate, like all that. If you want to take the opposite, I understand. Obviously, that was the Russiagate was a hoax, but you also got to be careful, because just because they're taking that stance doesn't mean the person that they're levying it against is your ally. Like, the enemy of my enemy isn't always my friend.
That's a great point. Yeah. And that's why I like Glenn Greenwald so much, because that guy's right on almost every issue.
And also a socialist.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. And Jimmy Dore's kind of like that too, surprisingly.
Yeah, him I'm less familiar with. I don't know a lot about
Jimmy
him.
Dore is actually, when he's going against the mainstream, like he's actually pretty funny.
Yeah. He's a socialist leftist YouTube commentator who was the first person that I heard say that the Human Rights Foundation is full of a bunch of spooks.
Yeah.
So he's got some good points. And then he'll
I had my hopes for Gladstein, but you know, a lot of people have made these points, and I've thought for quite a while as well that the quote term human rights is it's a red flag. It's a red flag, because I mean, there's all these different types of rights, you know, and if you're like steeped in, I guess you could say, libertarian reasoning or semantics or whatever, if you've gone down that rabbit hole and been like super like quote autistic about it, like there's a difference between negative rights and positive rights, and negative rights are like the right not to be aggressed against, and positive rights are this fictitious invention of the state and state actors to try to institute like government healthcare. Like, you have the right to be healthy, or the right to healthcare. It's like, no, that's a service, and that's force. That's forcing someone to give you a service, or you're forcing the appropriation of funds from others, or the purchasing power from others via printing to fund those services. Or you could call it either negative rights or natural rights or individual rights. But human rights and positive rights are red flags. And I know that I've heard of someone, I think I actually heard it on TFCC, Marty Bent talking about it, that there are people at Harvard that are specifically saying, no, positive rights are the way. Like they're actually coming out and saying it.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I mean, how many times have we seen the state bomb brown people in the Middle East for human rights?
Right.
Just completely decimate. I mean, the Vietnam War, human rights. I mean, that's a great point. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. I got to interview Gladstein probably close to a couple of years ago, and we talked about that, about negative rights versus positive rights. He was pretty good on that. But yeah, I mean, the positive rights came, like that whole idea of universal health care came from the Soviet Union. They're like, you don't have the right to live, but you have the right to health care. And that's just super treacherous, and I think that's important to bring up. Lurk says that Trump was recently spotted with Klaus Schwab. I don't know if that's true.
Gross. I mean, I know.
I saw a picture of that as well. Well, he was at the World Economic Forum. It was 2020. I think it was January 2020. I think it was about 2 years ago. I watched a little bit of a clip of it, and it was like him shaking his hand, and like Klaus Schwab was like, "I have the pleasure of introducing once again, like Donald Trump on the stage." Also, one quick thing, I want to be clear. I'm not like calling Alex Gladstein a spook. Like I don't know. Like I don't know, but he very well may be unintentionally a tool of a plan that he's not aware of. I don't know, and I don't even know that. But caution. I would say like urge caution as with anyone.
Yeah, my dilemma, and I would be a similar pledge. I don't have any good reason to like. He seems like a good guy to me. I think is the main thing I would say. That's the number one thing. My struggle with him is I have a lot of trouble figuring out like how much of his views are like deeply held beliefs, and then it's just like at the end of the day, he's just a statist who believes in democracy, and that just heavily informs his perspective on the world. I think that's one option, which is a totally legitimate option. And then the other option for me is how much does his position limit what views he can espouse? And that the second one seems a little bit more likely, which is not a super generous perspective on him. I acknowledge that. But it's just like that's what I, as best I can tell, that's what I would lean towards, is that his role in that organization. I mean, it's not like conspiratorial stuff with the HRF. I mean, look up Gary Kasparov is the chairman. Like, spend some time. That's not a good guy. That's a very, very bad guy. And that's, to me, that's the signal. Like, a lot of people point out, people from Epstein's circle were donators to HRF or whatever, and that's true. But to me, that's just a function of being a big giant charity. Like, big giant charities just attract that whole crowd that goes to galas and goes to, like, that's just, to me, that's not really the signal. But someone like Gary Kasparov being a chairman, that's way more of a signal. That's extremely concerning in my view.
Isn't Gary Kasparov? Isn't he the guy that like played against AlphaGo?
Yeah, so he was the former chess champion, and then, in my opinion, absolutely undeniable spook for the last like few decades. Like you talk about like things like Project Mockingbird, where they put well-known programs where they put prominent figures they put them basically out in the open to promote whatever it is the intelligence community perspective is. He's one of the primary examples of that in my opinion.
I like Gladstein. I just think he sucks on some things.
Yeah, democracy's stupid.
Democracy is incredibly oppressive and evil.
The real shame is the fact that people have been so psyoped into thinking that the word democracy is synonymous with freedom.
Yeah.
And democracy is a form of government, a governance structure. I guess no, it's not even a government structure. Technically it's a form of government, but it's not even a structure. It's really just a means of coming to a decision, and in practice, it's not even a means of coming to a decision. But yeah, like it's a farce. It's really more of a democracy is really more of a belief system than a governance structure in and of itself.
Yeah, it's governance by the retarded.
The Osho quote.
Yeah, of the retarded, by the retarded, for the retarded.
Because the people are retarded.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyways, we're about 2 hours in. I'm yawning. I think it's a pretty good show.
Yeah.
Fun.
What do we got? We got Scottsdale meetup tomorrow for anybody in Arizona. Fate Brewing in Scottsdale.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
Trying to think, do we have any other plugs?
Gilbert next week.
Yeah. So if you're Phoenix area, and I realize lots of people are not Arizona, but if you're Phoenix area, there is a meetup either in Gilbert or Scottsdale every single week, and then we're doing a couple of meetups a month in Tucson. Just gave away an S9 was that last week?
Yep.
Yeah.
Space heater.
Yeah.
If you have an electric heater in your house and you're not running an S9, I don't know what you're doing, because electric heaters are expensive and S9s offset it.
We did a Bitcoin mining focused meetup that started with "Do not buy miners right now," because they're way fucking overpriced. You probably will not ROI by the halving, and that should be your top priority if you're buying miners.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting when the Bitcoin price dips, everything gets more expensive, and when it increases, everything gets less expensive. So I would imagine the best time to buy a miner for home mining is one of these massive rips.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be getting into Nick Foster's DMs when Bitcoin rips up. Like, get me a miner now.
Yeah. So if we can hit 60K overnight, that's where you might want to think about hitting that buy order. But
60K, 58K.
Right now, yeah, I mean, fucking new S19s, I believe, last time I checked, are going for like 32, 33, 34 million sats. Like,
they came down.
Come on.
They came down a bit, but I don't know. I mean, there's lots of cool things you could do with S19s that you could justify buying one right now. It's just not solely for Bitcoin mining. Like, you could replace the
spot is when Bitcoin moons and it doesn't give the miners the mining or miner intermediaries enough time to adjust the price.
Yeah. Yeah, it usually takes a couple weeks for them to adjust those prices, because it's depending on what they bought the miners for and how quickly they can flip them around.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get there. I mean, I'm bullish on mining.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody should replace the heaters in their house, unless you have a gas heater, with an S19. Personal opinion.
Or at least an S9.
You would need a few
for your,
S9s.
like, living room or something.
No, I'm talking about your central heating.
It's a pretty big investment, though. That's a lot of to duct it into the system. And I don't know. Anyway, it's probably another.
Do it yourself. How much is a space heater or an actual heater, house heater? Probably about half the cost of an S9.
I don't know.
Maybe half to a quarter, and it's not making you any money. It's just a sink.
Because that's the only thing I'll say is I talk to a lot of people who are getting into mining or whatever who, I don't know, just like don't, like they've never done a, like a capital expenditure calculation ever. This is like the first time they're ever doing it, or they've never like really done a real legit in-depth like ROI analysis, like something like just like relatively basic financial calculations. A lot of people getting into mining have never done before, and in my opinion, should invest in a lot more financial education, which is obviously not going to school or any bullshit like that. It's just a couple of books is all it takes. But
oh wow, this is interesting. Ephesians says normal home heaters anywhere from 50 to 80 amps.
Oh, so you could run
You could run an S19 on the 20 amp circuit.
So Wow.
Yeah, Bitcoin miners are the most efficient heaters out there.
You can run 4.
That's insane. That's a lot of electricity.
That is a lot.
You're going to get more heat per capex with S9s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot more heat.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is like one underclocked S9 in each room, maybe one in the living room. Like that'll roast your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, at 980. I might be wrong, but in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to run them less than 980 because that's the peak efficiency. I understand maybe if you have like more machines and you want to turn them on and you don't have the electrical infrastructure, but you want to like distribute the hash over more machines, like I guess I can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But really like 980 is the most efficient, and you get like a solid, nice, nice little breeze of warm air. And they're really not that loud at 980. They really aren't. They're not that high screeching squeal. They're really doable.
Yeah. Now, Tucson's got one running, probably 10 feet away from 15 feet away from us in the other room.
Yeah.
Can't even tell.
Well, it's also, I'm not running it at 980. I should probably consider that, but I'm running it at 1.3 kilowatts. But yeah, Ephesians says so you could say 10 to 20 S9s for less the cost than an S19 and definitely ROI faster and produce more heat. Yep.
Yeah,
you're right there.
And if and that's the kind of thing where it's like you're like I remember I think it was last winter Neil tweeted out a picture of I think it was a couple of S9s. It might have been like an M20S or something like that. Anyway, whatever he had running in his crawl space, and just the heat coming up from the crawl space, which he was mining profitably. I would assume was mining profitably there, plus the heat coming up from the crawl space. Like he just didn't have a heat bill effectively, or had a negative heat bill.
A lot of people they take their power bill and then they take the amount of sats they get per day, like their mining revenue, and then they subtract their power bill and they're like, oh look, this is my profit per day. But no, like if you really want to get the profit per day, you take the capex, the initial cost of the miner, which is the capex, right? And you divide it per day until the halving, right? Because I think we all agree that it's like anything after the halving, that's gravy, or that's like the next phase. Like you really can't project beyond the halving because that's like a hard wall.
100%.
So we're like 2 years and 17 weeks, maybe 16 weeks. So 365 days times 2. So that's 600, 120, so 720, 730, and then 17 weeks, so 49, 70, 139. So 830, 860. 860 days, 850 days. So take like the cost in sats of the capex and divide it by like 850. Add that to the per day cost.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm I'll be the first to admit I'm very green and semi-retarded on mining, but that whole idea of like making sure you ROI by the halving. And then also having a laser focus on ROI and sats. Mm-hmm. That I think that's pretty undeniable. Those are two extremely important factors.
Yeah, that's good. Well, on that, I guess one last thing. Vanish.
Yeah, the firmware.
The firmware is out. Brains is slowly rolling out their firmware for the S19. They don't have BeagleBoard support yet, which I think most of them use BeagleBoards, but I might be wrong. Yeah. Most of the ones I've seen use BeagleBoards. So Brains isn't out. I can't use Brains, but Vanish is out. So that's pretty cool. You can overclock those S19s to I think 115. Well, it depends. It obviously depends on the
go to Joe Rogers' Twitter. He posted a screenshot today, but I believe he had some 96 terahash machines that I believe were in the 120 to 130 range.
Yep. And that's without a power supply upgrade. You can really get those things cranking up to like 140 if you get the power supply upgraded. And then if you immerse them, you can get it up to like 170 terahash.
That's it.
Wait, he has them at he's getting 130 terahash out of those without brain?
With Vanish, it's another
with
another
Vanish.
firmware.
No,
Yeah,
you said he's getting 110.
no, 120 to 130, I believe.
On
Go to
96.
Yeah,
That's
go
pretty
to. It's. I think he tweeted it in the last day or two. But yeah, go to Joe Rogers' Twitter. He put out a screenshot of it. I want to say it was 120 to 130 for a 96 terahash machine. But yeah, it's on his Twitter. He's got a little screenshot of it.
And when you go that high, you definitely lose efficiency. It uses more.
Is he clocking them at the stock clock rate though, or is he overclocking them?
He's overclocking.
Overclocking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Vanish has like some presets where you can bump up the wattage, and it has some estimates for what the hash rate will be with it. I've got a chart somewhere for a 92 terahash I was playing around.
You know, it'd be interesting if there was a way to project the not on page depreciation, which obviously you can like play games with that and push it all up. Apparently, you can push like 5 years of depreciation in an asset, even if it's not depreciating, up into the first year and all that fun stuff. But I'm talking about the actual depreciation of the actual physical machine. It'd be interesting if there was a way for this firmware to project that out. I know that would be a lot more difficult than a lot of the stuff that these firmwares do, though.
Yeah. I'm obviously not going to say the name, but I think I heard an explanation of that from potentially someone that you know that might have explained it also. But yeah, like all the stuff you can do with like depreciating up front and everything.
I can't find the chart. I charted it out. Bummer. That was a good chart. But yeah, lots of crazy stuff happening.
Yeah. Fun times. Thank you guys for joining. This is awesome. Really, really, really good turnout today.
It's a good time to be bullish and it's a bad time to be bearish.
Yeah, fuck the Bears.
But yeah. Anyways, thank you everybody in chat. Thanks for the tips tonight. Thanks for people that joined in spaces, and hope you guys have a good one.